Shalom from Jerusalem. In our Ignite the Truth Bible reading plan, we've been learning about King David and all his exploits. But this week there's a major transitioning taking place within the storyline as David dies and the reign passes to Solomon, his son. Solomon was a young man when he took over as king of Israel. That was a lot of responsibility. But he honored the Lord as his father had and worshipped him and gave sacrifices to the Lord. In chapter 3 of 1 Kings, we're told that God was pleased with his response and he invited Solomon to ask anything he would like at the beginning of his reign and that God would grant it to him. What an opportunity, right? I mean, what would you have asked God for if you could ask for anything and he would grant it? Well, Solomon asked for wisdom, for a discerning heart. He knew that he would need God's help to properly rule the nation of Israel. God was pleased with Solomon's request for wisdom and said in verse 11 that because he hadn't asked for wealth or long life or victory over his enemies, that he would grant him the wisdom and discernment that he requested. In fact, it said that because he asked for wisdom, all those other things that he didn't ask for would come to him as well. Solomon did many great things during his reign, but maybe the highest was building the first temple and dedicating it to the Lord in Jerusalem. We're told in this week's chapters that the name of the Lord was renowned throughout the known world because of all that Solomon did in Jerusalem, and that people were coming from everywhere to learn about God. In chapter 10, we will read about the Queen of Sheba and her visit with a large entourage to Jerusalem. She wanted to test Solomon's wisdom. And we're told that she was astounded, the word actually means breathless, at all that she saw of Solomon's court, the wealth, the wisdom, the organization that it portrayed. It was bringing glory to God's name. Because of his own experience of receiving wisdom from God, Solomon knew how important it was in life. And so he wrote about wisdom many places in his book of Proverbs that thankfully we still have today. In Proverbs chapter 2 and verse 6, he says, "For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding." And again, from his experience, he wrote in chapter 3, verse 13, "Blessed, happy is the man who finds wisdom, and the one who gains understanding." In all that this world is facing today, these troubling times, are you sensing more of a need for God's wisdom in your life? Well, the good news is that the very same God that granted wisdom to Solomon will give it to us when we ask humbly and by faith. The Apostle James wrote in his epistle in chapter 1, verses 5 through 6, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him." If you lack wisdom, ask God, and he will give it to you. But James also says, "But let him ask in faith, without doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea tossed about by the wind." When we ask God for wisdom, it's a humble acknowledgement of our own limitations and that God is still in control. Just as God was pleased with Solomon and his request for wisdom and granted it to him, you can be sure that God will give you his wisdom for whatever you face today.